Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hot on the heels, we have our next speaker. So I would very much like to introduce Marija, who is the host of the popular YouTube channel Deutsch mit Marija, where I'm sure you'll talk about this as well, but I've seen a number of episodes of this where, of specifically the ones where you're helping people with their prepare for their TELC or CFR tests. And so thank you so much for joining us, and I'll leave it to you, and then I'll come back at the end with any questions that the audience has. Thank you so much for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored. I'm very zoomed in somehow, but I don't think I can change it at that point. All right. So obviously, I'm the first non-native English speaker today, so that puts me under a lot of pressure, and I apologize upfront for my very rusty English. So I hope you will understand me still. I'm not really used to speaking English, but I'm going to talk about my English learning experience a little later because I think it's a nice example of how you can learn a language. Yes, so just to introduce myself briefly, I'm a YouTuber, and probably I made, I don't know, I lost count of videos I made so far, but it must be 1,000 plus, definitely more than 1,000 videos. So you might think that I'm not getting nervous anymore in front of camera. So I just found out that when I have to speak a different language than Russian or German, I'm very much nervous, so please apologize. No, I have to apologize for that. All right. So what I do basically, I teach German. I coach people who learn German, who study German, and I speak to a lot of people whose goal is to reach a very high level of German. So in my videos and also in our online courses, because I have an online language school for German matching basically my YouTube channel, I talk a lot to people whose aim is B2, C1, C2. And that's why I have to put a reference to Scott's talk because he was speaking about the different levels a lot. And this is what I get to deal with every day. The funny thing is, just don't tell anyone I said that on camera being live. I don't really care about exams. So I shouldn't be saying that because what I do for a living, I sell online courses where I'm helping people passing exams. What I mean by that is that I don't care about exams because it's a formality. But I do care about the people I coach. I do care about my followers, and I do care about helping people reach their goals. This is what I truly, absolutely love doing, what I do with all my heart. And I really, this is what I basically do every day. And doing that, I noticed two things. Or basically, I noticed that I live in two worlds. The one world is the one of polyglots, where people learn languages because they enjoy learning languages. They enjoy meeting other people who learn languages. They enjoy exchanging methods and ideas and just, hanging out with other people who learn languages. This is the one world. The other world is the world of people who are under extreme pressure because they have to pass a B2 exam, a C1 exam, maybe even a C2 exam. And what I hear a lot, for example, a couple of days ago, I was talking to a client, to a course participant, and she told me, I quote, I'm a housewife, I'm 40 years old. I mean, who cares if I ever learn German? She lives in Germany, she lives in Munich, I believe. And I was shocked because before the talk, or before the conversation I had with her, I prepared lots of advice how she could improve her grammar and her vocabulary and other stuff. And after that sentence, I was completely frozen because I knew what we now have to talk about is basically the woman's self-esteem. And that, of course, you have to learn a language when you're 40. So it's not an age limit. There is no age limit. You can be 127 and learn languages if you enjoy it. But the point is, it wasn't about methods. It wasn't about vocabulary. It was basically about the fact that this woman was blocked, or she was blocking herself any kind of talents in terms of languages she had. She blocked by the belief that first, she's too old, second, no one needs her to speak German. What, I mean, can you start a new profession being 40? Like, life is basically over. And this is what our conversation was about. So this is one of my probably most important learnings during the past 4 years. So I started my YouTube channel 4 years ago. And I noticed at some point that people do want me to make videos about grammar and vocabulary and other parts of the language. And the other part is to talk about motivation, to talk about, you have to believe in yourself being able to learn a language. If you don't, if you can't imagine you being fluent in any language, so for example, in German, in the case of my clients, my students, then you will never be able to speak it fluently. So it's like the basic, law of attraction if you're into it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. No matter which methods you use, which books you use, which teachers you use. So this is why my talk today is very much about the fact that every person is his or her own best language teacher, not in terms of methods and didactics of learning a language, but because you yourself have to believe in yourself. You have to know what works for me, which techniques have been useful for me. How did I learn the things I learned best so far? Because everyone, no matter who we talk about, is an expert in something. Maybe it's childcare, maybe it's dealing with your dog, maybe it's cooking something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what profession you have or where you are or who you are an expert in something. So when we talk about learning a language, we have to remember that me, myself, and I, those are the three main experts to decide how I'm supposed to learn a language. And as I talked before about the people who are under extreme pressure, my experience is that they tend to get lost and forget that they are the most important. The central people in their learning process are themselves. They forget it because they're stuck in formal stuff. They're stuck in exam requirements. And why I keep saying that I don't care about the exams? Because I think if you have a very clear goal, if you know where you want to get to, if you know your why, you will learn a language up to a very high level, and you won't care about which exam you will have to pass and which formal requirements it has. But what I deal with every day is, for example, people who tell me, I went to the job center. I'm not sure if it's called in English the same way, but the authority that is responsible for, employing people who have no jobs. And as I work with foreigners all the time, who are mostly in Germany, they tell me stories like this. I went to the job center and they told me, nice, you're a surgeon, you're a heart surgeon, your diploma is from Russia? Okay, you can't be surgeon in Germany, we're sorry. Or even sometimes they don't tell you that they're sorry. And then they say, well, you can deliver pizza. I mean, it's a nice job as well. And why I mentioned a heart surgeon, because a couple years ago, I used to coach many doctors because I made an observation that people with a very, how to say it, intense profession, which needs a lot of work, a lot of studies, a lot of practice, etc., they are so determined that they need to learn, for example, German. They need to pass the exam. And this one particular heart surgeon who I had the honor to coach, he went to the job center and they told him, well, you can't work here as a doctor. You need whatever, German level C1. And he said, okay, give me 6 months. So he went home, he searched different options, how to, bring his German to a certain level. He contacted me, he had some coaching sessions with me. In the end, well, not the end, but in the end of his exam stuff, he passed C1. He works as a heart surgeon now in a German hospital in Bavaria. So what I want to say, if your motivation is really high, if you believe that if you don't pass this certificate, if you can't be who you are, if you can't do your profession, then basically your life is over. Then nothing has a point. Then you go and you learn the language. So this is the part of my world which I experience every day. It's not about having fun learning a language. It's about being effective learning a language. But also my experience is that it's really important to keep this joy of learning a language, even when you're under extreme pressure. And now imagine that my coaching sessions mostly consist of talks like this. So I ask, okay, you need to pass an exam. What for? And then they tell me, okay, well, I need the certificate. And then I say, okay, what do you want to do with it? And then we get talking. And then I start asking questions about who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Etc., etc. So this is basically what makes me a psychologist without actually being a psychologist. Because like the lady who said, I'm 40, there is no point in learning a language and no one needs me. This is basically where the psychologist comes in, and when we need to talk about many different things before we even get to the point that, okay, you need some methodology to learn vocabulary, and you need to learn grammar, and you need to do exercises. So I believe that if you don't set up this basis, what everything is based on, then it doesn't matter how many words per day you learn, how many exercises you do, and how much you practice. So I also want to talk briefly, I hope, about my language learning experience, because I learned German when I was 11, and my native language is Russian. So I'm from Riga, from Latvia initially, and I learned German when my mom took me for a year to a German school. So we went for a year to Germany, and I attended a Waldorf school in Mannheim. My level of German on my very first school day was like, hallo, ich bin Marija, ich bin 11 Jahre alt, ich komme aus Riga. So that was the best I could do. I learned German within, let's say, 3 months. And every time I hear someone speak about immersion and you just need the environment to get the language, I have to smile because my environment was really cruel. So imagine it was a class of, let's say, 30 kids. I was the only foreigner in that class. And they were really, really curious to find out everything about me. So they kept asking me questions, and I couldn't answer them because my German was like, I don't know, a 0.5. So what they did, they corrected every bloody mistake I made. So when in class I knew the answer to some math task, I raised my hand and I said something that was grammatically wrong but mathematically correct. At least 5 of the boys in my class would say, Marija, learn decent German. Now, could you speak correctly finally? We've been teaching you so hard. So that was a really tough time for me. But in the end, I survived, as you can see. I even, teach others. But that was my experience. So that was my experience of immersion and diving into language. And 3 or 4 months later, I was fluent in German. Don't ask me about details, how exactly it happened, but it happened. And now I consider German my second mother tongue. I don't know, something like that. And then the even more interesting thing is, after this year, I went back to Riga and I finished school in Riga. That was a Russian school with a lot of German classes. And at some point, I guess it was Form 10, so I was 16, let's say. We also came into the joy of English lessons. It was like a school which was Russian. We had Latvian because it's a state language, and we had German as the second foreign language. And so at the age of 16, we started actually learning English, which was really interesting because we entered Form 10, let's say, with a level of A2 max. And I remember I couldn't build a correct sentence in English. And what happened next, we had a teacher who was very young. So we were 16, he was maybe 22. And what he did, he was teaching us TRIZ, Theory of Inventive Problem Solving. It's spelled like TRIZ, and it goes back to Russian acronym. And so basically, he was teaching us how to think creatively, but we had to do everything, all the exercises in English. As you can imagine, most of my class hated this teacher with their whole heart. I remember for me, it was a huge challenge because we had to do a lot of really complicated tasks. So imagine you have to watch, let's say, Fight Club without subtitles, nothing. So your English level is A2, and you have to write an analytical essay why a particular scene was made like this by the director of the movie Fight Club. Just imagine the complexity of such a task. So in the end, I guess after 3 months of English classes with this teacher, I wrote an essay. What did I take from The Little Prince? It was a very philosophical essay, and probably it wasn't perfect in terms of language. But the fact that I did write an essay in English, and three months before that, I wasn't able to build a correct English sentence, it shows us that if you're really motivated, then the levels don't matter, the exams don't matter, and some formal requirements don't matter at all. Because when you have this sparkle of motivation and interest that children have, if you watch a child that learns something with a lot of passion, then you know that this is what you need to learn a language up to a very high level. And this is what I keep teaching, and I hope sharing with all my videos and all my courses and anything I do online and offline, etc. Because if that is missing, then it doesn't matter how good the course is that you're attending, how great the books are that you read, and the apps and the software, etc. So anything else are tools you can use to improve your language and to be more effective. But if that sparkle of motivation is missing, then it sucks, basically. So what I keep saying to my students is, when you learn a language, make sure that you are in a mood. Imagine Christmas morning. You are 6 years old, and you are looking forward to the presents and the meal and whatever, to the family coming together. Remember this feeling. This feeling is what you should be having as the basis of any learning activity. And then you will just rock it. And I think I will just round it up at this sentence, because I could be going on for hours. And I don't want to steal the time of next speakers. So I will be happy to answer questions. Just shoot, go ahead and ask me anything. And I'm very happy that I could be here today and share some thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marija. That's super nice and yeah, real. I liked it a lot. And your English is great, by the way. I don't know what you're nervous about. So if anyone has any questions for Marija, please put them in the chat. So the first one we have is, what do you do to foster motivation?
Well, electricity, like shocks. No, basically, I just, I talk to people and I try to find their why, because you never learn for an exam. You always learn for, to become someone later, to reach some particular career level, maybe. So, and this is individual. You can't just motivate a group of people. You have to find an individual why of every single person.
Definitely. And so how important is it to practice a language with a local? What do you think?
It depends
native speaker.
What for. I mean, if you want to speak, it's definitely useful. So this is how I learn Spanish right now, for example, and my Spanish is very lazy because I'm not under pressure. I don't have to learn. So I just use the opportunity to talk to a Mexican guy several times a week. And it's just the best thing I could do for my language, because everything else is good for vocabulary and grammar and stuff, but you can only practice speaking by speaking.
Also, you mentioned that when you were in elementary school and you were starting to learn German, that you were being corrected for every single grammatical mistake that you had. Do you think that this is helpful, to be corrected for every mistake? For instance, I'm learning German and I have many tutors. And I prefer not to be corrected, but maybe I'm going about it the wrong way. What do you think?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that my example is a good strategy for everyone, because the chance that I would have a very low self-esteem in the end is really high. But I mean, I was lucky. But what I do in my courses and in my individual coachings, I always correct, but I never interrupt the speaker. So if we are online, I use the chat to write the correct form of what you were saying. So if we were in a live class now, I would be writing the correct version of what you just said. So you can see it, but it doesn't interrupt you in the middle of your sentence. And I think it's all about, you have to be polite, you have to be respectful, and then all the corrections work just fine.
Definitely. Okay, cool. And then the last question I have is, why and when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started 4 years ago. The why is an interesting question. I had no idea that it would grow into something that great as it did, but I was kind of limited in my class where I was teaching offline at the language school. And there were things I could do, and there were things that my boss told me, look, could you stop this bullshit, please? Could you go back to, exam preparation? We're a serious school, and you're making fun, and you're using Rammstein to teach listening comprehension. You can't really do that. And I said, yes, I can. Watch me. So I went off to YouTube, and I was combining offline and online for a while, and then I just quit the job, and I was left with the YouTube channel, which is cool and still is.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, it was super great to have you. And yeah, thanks. So we will be back soon with the next speaker. Thanks, Marija.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.